All right, and welcome to this talk today. I am super excited to have you watching this take on GraphQL's second act, a practitioner's tale. So what do I mean with that? Well, you're going to see in a few moments that I've been around the GraphQL ecosystem for a while. I've been an educator in this space for the last 5 years, and now I'm also a senior sales engineer working for a GraphQL company. We do more than just GraphQL, but what I want to talk with you about today is what I have seen over the last 5 to 6-ish years of the GraphQL ecosystem, how it's matured, how it's evolved, and where it's going. And there are going to be hot takes in this talk, so bear with me. I will try to make reasoned approaches for it. This is the most hand-wavy talk that I give, but I think the concepts are important. I think that this is an exciting time to be in this space, and if you haven't gotten on the GraphQL train yet, this is a good time to have a look because it's solving a lot more problems than it was ever intended to do. Well, that being said, so who am I when we talk about practitioner's tale? Senior software engineer at Hasura. That's relatively new for me, so still getting a little bit stumbling over that one. But yeah, like I said, I've been in this space for 5+ years, but I have a background mostly in digital strategy, in branding, or like digital branding, and helping people figure out touch points. So in the product-y space, I've been in the figuring out how does the bleeding edge tech sort of evolve for quite a while now. And yeah, I'm hoping that maybe this will give you some of perspective about what it is that I'm bringing to this topic. But if you have any questions on this, you can find me all over the place. Primarily, though, at MotleyDev on Twitter, which will be at the bottom of all my slides. Feel free to follow me, and you can let me know what you thought of this talk. But like I said, there will be plenty of jokes. There will be dad humor there. You can see dad times 4, but there's going to be a lot of hot takes here. So buckle up. We're going to have a lot of fun. Who is Hasura? So if you haven't ever been around the GraphQL ecosystem, you might be totally new to Hasura, or if you've just been off writing GraphQL servers by hand. What Hasura is it's an open source engine that can instantly turn data sources into schemas for GraphQL. Like, how does that work? We give it a Postgres schema, we give it a BigQuery schema, something of that nature, and we will actually generate all of the GraphQL bits for you. And there are opinions on that as well, which I'm more than happy to talk with you about in the hallway track. But suffice it to say, this is kind of what Hasura is, what we do, and it's been really widely adopted. So it creates an API for your data with very robust access controls. We have permissions and everything else, all metadata based, so you're not modifying underlying data sources. We support custom logic. We have all of the ephemeral models, event triggers, REST APIs, everything you would expect. Have a look at it. I think you're going to really enjoy it. We have both commercial as well as open source offerings. And lastly, we're hiring. So this stuff kind of, if you like to geek out about this stuff and you're in this space, let me know. Anyways, so where does Hasura sort of sit? This kind of helps you understand a little bit about what it is that we do. It's not really a gateway, but it kind of sits there. It handles all of the inbound requests of your clients, mobile apps, desktops, whatever else you have, including microservices. This is where we're going to get to some hot takes later on. And it brings all of those together into a really powerful way to sort of federate out these requests to your online data sources. You make a GraphQL query, we convert that to SQL or into a REST request and fire it off to your data system. And kind of where does that sort of look like, or how does it look like? You can see here a good example of that. Essentially, we have query coming in, select a request against the actual data sources. This is literally like what's happening under the hood here. But it's popular. Like, it's really being used by a lot of people. We are all over the Fortune 500. The top Fortune 40 of the top Fortune 100 are using Hasura. We're really in a lot of different verticals and ecosystems. So if you haven't heard of it, or you're needing something to solve a data federation problem, good chances you'll want to have a look at this. Last little bit of my spiel is we do have a HasuraCon coming up here in June. So if you're interested in this topic, I believe this is in 2 weeks as of the time of this talk, join us. It's free, and we'd love to kind of see you there and let you find out all about Hasura and what it is that we do. Okay, I'm limited on time, so we are going to just dive right into this. Assumptions that you'll need to know to be able to understand this talk. You need to know a little bit about what GraphQL is, because I'm not going to give you what the GraphQL is talk here. You also should be able to understand that some people get angry about ridiculous things on the internet. Hence the hot takes. So this is going to be a response part to some different dissident opinions I've seen online where people have said, hey, what you're doing is totally crazy. And I want to explain a little bit about why it is that I think that it's okay to do what I'm proposing and why I actually think that it's a really good idea. So like I said, strong opinions, loosely held, strongly inferred. Again, practitioners take. This is actually from sort of my background, having talked with customers all up and down the ecosystem, from enterprises to startups and anything in between. But haters going to hate. So what you going to do? All right, so let's start off with strong opinions. First one, REST as a technology is preferred by single service providers. If you're trying to ship something, I'm going to explain this in a little bit, but REST is preferred by single service providers. If you are delivering an API as a product externally. GraphQL is preferred by multiple service consumers. And why is that, right? Because when you're talking about REST as something that's being delivered as a service, it's easy to model about, it's easy to reason about, it's easy to define what the deliverables are, pack it all up into a little bundle and send it out. GraphQL is great for people who say, I need to consume a whole bunch of different services, and is brought on by the data access challenges of today. So you've got databases, you've got microservices, you've got this service is trying to read from that service as well as that database. And when you're looking at the access to all this data, it is an absolute mess. And there are ORMs and SDKs and CLIs and APIs and everything in between that your developers have to learn to be able to sort of figure out just how to connect, let alone manage the waterfall of dependencies where the IDs from this service are going to be what's the magic glue for this database over there. It's a mess. The ideal would be, what if I could actually have all of my services accessible through a single GraphQL entry point where my databases are accessible through this API, my microservices are available through this database, through this API, and if I'm in that microservice and I want to read from a database or another microservice, why can't I just still use the same service in between? And here enters the first hot take, is I'm actually proposing here that GraphQL solves this problem in such a neat way. Why not use GraphQL from the microservices side as well? Like, that's borderline blasphemy for some people, but we're going to get into a bit more why I think this is actually a good idea. So it kind of boils down to REST is easy to model around deliverables, because I can sort of just say, you need this API to have X inside of it. I'll package it all up and send it out. GraphQL is easy to model around consumables because what it's doing is it's saying, hey, I need to have these different data dependencies. I need this data with that data. I need this data from here and that data from there, and I need to glue it together in one place. And so this is sort of where we see GraphQL as really the solution for data federation. And I'm using the word model here very specifically. I'm keeping this very high level, but models are intentionally being used here because the implementation is challenging. So Metcalfe's law for GraphQL, or the sum of the parts analysis for those that are in kind of the API geek space, maybe some of you, I don't know. But Metcalfe's law, network theory, right? So let's have a look here at, kind of a really abstract model. So what we have here is just totally random models floating in our system. Users, coffee, go together, and scooters. Like, how do we combine these as well? Well, if we actually build out, more models, and we start to have the, more different pieces from these models and their neighbor models kind of come into the picture here. We've got coffee shops now. We've got places to park scooters. We can see that if we're able to build sort of semantic relationships between these, not thinking about the technology, if we can just build relationships, well, suddenly a product emerges out of here where, like, we might actually have a recommendation engine now. Like, I could sort of say, well, you are frequently charging your scooter at this coffee shop and you've done it 30 times over the last month, and it's a rainy day, so how about a nice hot drink on your way to work today? Like, I can build a product out of these semantic relationships across these models. And this is where it gets really interesting with GraphQL, because if you want to try to design a REST API, a REST service for this, good luck. Okay, so what I'm ultimately talking about here is that there is less overhead for orchestrating services. There's a smaller control plane overall. There's reusable patterns no matter what it is that you're modeling out. And it's totally agnostic of what the consumer is. It could be a microservice, it could be a mobile app, it could be whatever. GraphQL, or doing this model around a consumable approach, gives us freedom in how it is that we build out services. And when we have that freedom that still gives us strong contracts, we actually are able to ship software a lot faster. Okay, let's move into even more theoretical models about, let's say, common GraphQL service structure, something that's a bit more concrete. But I'm going to go ahead and picture here in some colors. Queries are going to be here in blue on the left, and we're going to have our mutations in red on the other side. In some cases we have SQL calls, in some cases we have REST calls, but this is kind of an e-commerce model, right? We've got the ability to sort of picture that we have this need for all of these different pieces of data. Now, with GraphQL, I'm really just accessing these models or these mutation methods without having to worry about, is this a REST call, is this a SQL call, or any of the other pieces. I can make these calls on a model level basis. And what I'm also able to do now is get the full data dependency architecture for any one of these entry points with GraphQL, right? Like, I can say for this purchase, well, I need to be aware of what the product I'm purchasing is. I need to be aware of the order. Like, this is a mutation, right? I need to be aware of a user. So if I want to have a purchase mutation occur, I need access to all this other data to complete that in some way. Why do I have to suddenly build out a whole bunch of different architecture pieces? Or why can't I just use the same GraphQL to actually, from that purchase mutation, reach out to my products like inventory, or reach out to my user? Are they old enough to buy this? Why can't I, from inside of my mutation, why can't I reach out with the same benefit of GraphQL APIs and single interface for all my data sources? Why can't I do that? Because people are telling me, well, GraphQL is only designed for mobile apps or websites. That's ridiculous, right? I don't want to be constrained by how it is that I want to architect and build my applications. And if you haven't gotten this so far, I'm really coming from a product person's perspective here. But GraphQL from inside of that service is really helpful. Okay, let's go a bit less abstract here. So let's talk about financial modeling, which is the first place I gave this talk at API Days London. So we have essentially a risk assessment is a entry point here. This could be a query. This could be mutation. I'm trying to sort of get a async evaluation. Network credit average, historical income, history of returns, economic variables. Like, all of these are extremely federated data pieces and extremely critical to controlling this risk assessment or to get an evaluation on that. But for some reason in the GraphQL world, we're told, sure, add the risk assessment endpoint, But then from there, you need to go back to the SDKs. From there, you need to go back to making bespoke fetch requests to your REST services. Like, you can't benefit from the GraphQL API where you've connected all of this already. You can't use that because, well, it's technically from a microservice, and as we all know, GraphQL is only for front-end clients. I hope you're really appreciating how much I'm pounding on this straw man, but it's ridiculous that we've built this constraint around the usage of this scenario. So I'm talking a lot about this model, and I want to now give you some from the practitioner side here. When I'm talking about doing it this way, when I'm talking about allowing you to use GraphQL, yes, on clients, yes, with subscriptions and real-time data and on the websites and everything else, but I'm saying also use it inside of the microservices. The reason is we see this. We see this through healthcare. We see this with ETL companies, like the whole SaaS products, people doing DORA metrics where you're going from GitHub to incident reports. Global banking, we have many banks using this pattern, specifically GraphQL as a microservice. And if you're not doing that because you're hung up that GraphQL is just a front-end client technology, you are really wasting time shipping software. TM, trademark, copyright, I stand by that. You really need to have a look at it because there's a good chance that you're not doing it in the most performant way possible. Okay. Here's a list for you. Dissenting opinions, angry opinions on the internet, but everybody's allowed to be wrong. Let's have a look here. So here's where the arguments that I get back. So I'm going to go ahead and place some of them here, and hopefully I can address them for you as well. Big one, it's not what GraphQL was created for. This is probably the biggest argument that we hear is don't put GraphQL microservices because it's not what GraphQL was created for. But I will argue it is exactly what it was designed for, right? It was designed to access federated data with pared down payloads, exactly what is needed, where it's needed. That's what you want. You want minimal surface areas in your microservices, not getting whole bunches of data that you have to somehow put through another gateway to filter out the excessively chatty services. Like, this is exactly what it was designed for. It just happens to not always be occurring. The need doesn't always occur on a client. What about latency? Okay, we get this one a fair amount. Reality is it's marginally higher than optimally designed REST alternatives, and it is also a solvable problem. So there are solutions and techniques for getting around latency issues, co-location of data, but the way that most enterprises are having to work with these different REST services anyways, you've got gateways within gateways. You're like, in a really purest best case scenario, you might beat out the standard GraphQL type solution where you have a single entry point. And that is in an optimal scenario. So gotchas with this approach, there's none. So end of my talk. We'll see. Okay, of course I'm not going to do that to you. No, gotchas. Okay, yes, for sure. Latency, right? So latency is an issue that needs to be solved, and it's one that Hasura is working on. We've got caching out of the box. We have solutions that we try to use to help you be multi-cloud, multi-region, horizontal scaling, all that kind of stuff that we're attempting to try to solve some of these problems. If you're not using Hasura, you're having to do it on yourself. So another reason to have a look at Hasura, because why not solve it all together? But it's a solvable problem. New APIs bring new problems. This is another one. This is a new space. This is a space where there are going to be challenges like caching, like authorization, everything else that comes along with that. But again, like I said, Hasura, for example, as a company is existing to solve these problems at a wider level. And we're not the only ones. There are other companies that are solving this problem and working on these problems. Hasura is just the best one. So. No, I'm not paid to say that. Yes, I am. Okay. So what's Hasura? What Hasura is going to do about it? What are we doing to try to sort of fit this paradigm for everybody? Well, One of the areas that we're working on is that we are creating a new paradigm that's going to be purely model driven. And the benefits we're going to get out of that is that it's 100% declarative. It's not dependent upon the implementation details. The model defines your data as affordances, which is like, is this summable? Is this groupable? Et cetera, et cetera. And the model defines its own relations. It defines its own shapes to other parts of the API. And what's really interesting too is that it's completely GraphQL agnostic. So the tooling that Hasura provides ultimately is going from models to APIs for you automatically. And that's a really powerful concept that I think is going to be really special. And it's actually really what Hasura has always been doing all along. If you looked at our history, we've had some other steps in between, but the reality is what we're really doing is we're actually been converting models to APIs from the beginning. But it's really an interesting space. The sad fact is I'm out of time, but also they said I couldn't give this talk. I asked if I could give this talk, but but they said no. They really wanted this one that I gave today. I did give the talk about model-driven GraphQL at API Days New York. So have a Google, have a YouTube on that, and I think you'll enjoy some of that content. If you like my sort of rambly, hand-wavy style, you're going to love that video. Anyways, where to find out more to wrap this up. So Hasura.io, obviously Hasura HQ on Twitter. You can find out more from me at OmniDev, and then HasuraCon, our event's another great place. I will be on site in Helsinki. You can definitely ask me any questions. But if you also are curious about anything, just reach out to me. I would love to answer your questions. And I am the senior sales engineer for Europe. So like, if you have any questions, technically speaking, for the entire European market, I'm your guy, and I love to take them. Any queries? I just love that animation. I have to get it in once. So I think that's going to probably take it for questions. Put them in the chat, and I'll see if I can help you out. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.